Welcome to session number 3 on how to study history. Today we are going to look at words mean things, and they have to be understood in the context of who wrote it. So a word would mean something in the 1600s that it might not mean the same thing in the 1800s or even the 21st century. So, like I said before, if we're studying American original history, then we must use the Webster's 1828 dictionary of the American language. It's the American dictionary of the English language. Okay, so what it means in England is irrelevant to what it means here. So, with that in mind, we'll share screen and we'll get into it. Okay, so here we're using Article 3, Section 18 of the Mississippi Constitution as the foundation of our study. And we're going to get into this in more detail in session 4. But if you look right here at the bottom of the clauses, it'll tell you historical references. Okay, so these are precedent. So today we're just going to look at the words. So Section 18 in the Bill of Rights, and remember, if it's in the Bill of Rights, it's enumerated and restricted. This is off limits to the government. It is solely the individual person's responsibility, and no legislator can change it, amend it, or fail to uphold it, depending on what it tells you to do. So, no religious test as a qualification for office shall be required, and no preference shall be given by law to any religious sect or mode of worship, but the free enjoyment of all religious sentiments and the different modes of worship shall be held sacred. The rights hereby secured shall not be construed to justify acts of licentiousness, injurious to morals, or dangerous to the peace and safety of the state, or to exclude the Holy Bible from use in any public school of this state. So, with that in mind, we're going to simply define the terms and see what kind of light we can show on it. We're going to start with religion and the noun religion. And so it is defined in its most comprehensive sense. It includes a belief in the being and perfections of God, in the revelation of his will to man, in man's obligation to obey his commands, in a state of reward and punishment, and in man's accountableness to God, and also true godliness or piety of life, with the practice of all moral duties. It therefore comprehends theology as a system of doctrines or principles, as well as practical piety, or for the practice of moral duties without a belief in a divine lawgiver and without reference to his will or commands is not religion. So it's pretty simple and pretty basic. I'm not going to go into the rest of the definitions, but down here in verse 4, definition 4, it says any system of faith and worship. Any system of faith and worship. And it includes pagans, Mohammedans, as well as Christians. Okay, so that's something that's also needs to be understood. So we go back over here. Well, let's go look at religious while we're here real quick. religious is adjective, and it's pertaining or relating to religion as a religious society, religious sect, a religious practice, religious subjects. It's pertaining or relating to religion. So with that in mind, basically religion in itself is our duty to our Creator and obedience to his commands. And it says no religious test. A test is something that was a very serious thing in the founding era, especially in England, beginning with Henry VIII more than, and then his daughter Elizabeth, and so on, and then King James at the time of the Pilgrims leaving. They had, well, let's finish the thing. It says, no religious test as a qualification for office shall be required, and no preference shall be given by law to any religious sect or mode of worship. This is kind of one little phrase here together. No religious test is a qualification for office. Back when the king was in charge of the church, very similar to the Pope in Rome. And this is not for pointing fingers at any religion or any of that kind of thing. This is just history, okay? So in England, King James had his own Bible authorized, remember? So you were only authorized to read that Bible and that Bible alone in England. The Pilgrims that came over here and a lot of the Protestants wanted to read the Geneva Bible. That was against the king. But also you had to be a card-carrying member of the Church of England. And if you broke the rules that were given by whatever monarch was in charge, sometimes they were strict, sometimes they were more lax, you would be severely punished, even to the point of burning at the stake. So if you weren't a card-carrying Anglican, Church of England, you would not be able to, you would not be permitted to hold certain offices in the government. And being a priest in the church was part of the government. And so a religious test, I live in Mississippi. There's a whole bunch of Baptists here, and the part that I live in also has a bunch of Catholics. So part of the religious tests for those denominations are different variances of the Apostle Creed, or you have like an oath of allegiance. I'm a good Baptist because I believe X, Y, and Z. And the other one is I'm a good Catholic because I believe X, Y, and Z. So that would be a religious test, is what creed do you swear to? Is an easy way to look at it. So we don't have any of those qualifications in the state of Mississippi. Now, a lot of the states had those in 1776. And so this was a new thing that came in because of the First Amendment. So, no preference shall be given by law to any religious sect. So let's look at the word sect, because we've already seen the definition of religious is pertaining or relating to religion or the duty we owe our Creator. Sect is a body or number of persons united by tenets, chiefly in philosophy or religion, but constituting a distinct party by holding sentiments different from those of other men. Okay, so a sect is a body of people that have tenets or bylaws or certain philosophy or religion. Okay, so it's a unique group of people that have a common purpose. but it's usually in the area of philosophy or religion. The Bible talks about the sects of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Today, a sect would be considered the Baptist versus the Methodist versus the Catholic versus the Episcopalians versus the Presbyterians. And that's all it means. It's a group of people united in a common cause, usually in the areas of philosophy or religion. But it says here, no preference shall be given by law to any religious sect or mode of worship. That should be self-explanatory with what we just saw. Because of the First Amendment, religious liberty, the government is not going to tell you this is the authorized or established church in the state of Mississippi. You can go to whatever denomination you want to without any interference with government whatsoever, even to the point of you can choose to not go without any consequences whatsoever. I was in Williamsburg not too long ago, and I asked the character of George Mason, who they're walking encyclopedias of the people they represent. I asked him about separation of church and state, and he explained it when it comes to church and state is they both have functions that they have to, they work together as a unit, because the Constitution has no provisions for charity, because charity is a responsibility of the church. So think about that next time somebody wants you to pay for somebody's charitable needs. It says, but, okay, so the government is not going to tell you this is the authorized or established church, official church of the state. You can go whatever denomination you want to, Muslim, Hindu, Zen, Catholic, Episcopalian, or none at all. Okay. But the free enjoyment of all religious sentiments in the different modes of worship shall be held sacred. So we're going to look up here see what sacred says. Maybe it doesn't mean the same back then as it does today. First it says holy, pertaining to God or to his worship, separated from common secular uses and consecrated to God and his service as a sacred place, sacred day, sacred feast, sacred service, or sacred orders. Proceeding from God and containing religious precepts as the sacred books of the Old and New Testament, narrating or writing facts respecting God and holy things as a sacred historian. So we see that if it is sacred, then it has to do with pertaining to God or his worship. And definition number 7 says it's inviolable, as if appropriated to a supreme being as sacred honor or promise, meaning if you swear an oath, then you cannot violate that oath. But all of these things, these religious sentiments and this freedom of worship in any way you like, whether it's a Christian or non-Christian religion. But it's also very important to know that it is talking about religion is to be held sacred, not irreligion. Think about that. It goes on, it continues. But all religious sentiments and the different modes of worship shall be held sacred. The Jews have their modes of worship that are different from the way the Presbyterians do, the way the Pentecostals do, the way the Catholics do. It is a way they run their church service. We have a home-based Bible study group, have been running those for 42 years. We have a certain system that we kind of follow or model, but we're free to change it around. But it's not the same as if you were go to a Catholic church or a Lutheran church. It's just the way we do it. And there's no better way than one other. It's just our freedom of choice. That's just an example. Now, the rights hereby secured. What rights hereby secured? Number one, no religious test. No preference by law to any religious sect over another one as the official church of the state. As the base of one is the Church of England at the time. And then also the free enjoyment of all religious sentiments and various modes of worship. Those are secured. Okay, that's what it says. The rights hereby secured. All right, so religious rights are secured. The rights hereby secured shall not be construed. That's what the next word is. Most people have never heard that one. Just look at the basic verb here. Is to arrange words in their natural order, to reduce from a transpose to a natural order, as to discover the sense of a sentence, hence to interpret, and when applied to a foreign language, to translate, to render into English, as to construe Greek, Latin, or French, to interpret, to explain, to show, or to understand the meaning. You can't construe religious liberty, meaning you can't monkey with the definition of the word to make it mean something other than it is. The rights that are secured are religious rights. You can't construe that religious liberty and that religious freedom to justify. Let's look at the word justify. To prove or show to be just or conformable to law, right, justice, propriety, or duty, to defend or maintain, to vindicate as right. We cannot justify disobedience or ingratitude to our Maker. We cannot justify insult or incivility to our fellow man. Intemperance, lewdness, profaneness, and dueling are in no case to be justified. So that's the definition, but it's a courtroom definition. And words mean things. And that's what's so big about this word construed. Construed is this is what it means, and it doesn't mean anything else. And justifying is, like we said over here, we'll look at it real quick once again. It's to prove or show to be just or conformable to law. Okay, you can't try and make these next things conformable to law. Number one, they are not held sacred. So we're going to look at what is not held sacred and is not conformable to the law. Acts. We are guaranteed freedom of speech, writing, worship, printing, assembly, to discuss such things. So acts are verbs, they're actions, they're activities. You can think and speak however you want. However, you cannot act however you want in a civil society. That's why we have laws and restrictions. So let's look up licentiousness. This is a hard one. Licen. Here we go. Licentiousness, excessive indulgence of liberty, contempt of the just restraints of law, morality, and decorum. The licentiousness of authors is justly condemned. The licentiousness of the press is punishable by law. Law is the god of wise men. Licentiousness is the god of fools. So you can't act like a fool. Excessive indulgence of liberty. Simply put, we don't have a free country. We have laws, we have rules, we have liberty. Freedom means no rules, no laws whatsoever. Liberty is defined by how you are allowed to act in society. So, acts of licentiousness, injurious to morals. We got to see injurious. Wrongful, unjust, hurtful to the rights of others. That which impairs rights or prevents the enjoyment of them is injurious. And then morals. Morals. Conduct, behavior, course of life in regard to good and evil. The practice of the duties of life as a man of correct morals. Some, as corrupt in their morals as vice could make them, have been solicitous to their children's virtuously and piously educated. What can laws do without morals? Let's look at morality real quick, which is another form, is the noun form. The system of morality to be gathered from the writings of ancient sages falls short of that delivered in the gospel. Morality, the doctrine or system of moral duties, or the duties of men in their social character and ethics. So morals is the social well-being, and you're duty bound to live a certain way in society. That's why we have laws to put you in jail. The quality of an action which renders it good, the conformity of an act to the divine law, or the principles of rectitude. This conformity implies that the act must be performed by a free agent and from a motive of obedience to the divine will. This is the strict theological and scriptural sense of morality, but we often apply the word to actions which accord with justice and human laws without reference to the motives from which they proceed. So, practice of moral duties, but the proper moral duties is conformity to an act of the divine law. It must be performed by a free agent and from a motive of obedience to the divine will. So, religious liberty is a secured right that cannot be construed to justify. It's not going to hold up in court. You can't use religious liberty to act any way, any darn fool way that you want. Licentiousness is excessive liberty. It's injurious to morals, which is to the divine will of God, or dangerous to the peace and safety of the state. So this licentiousness and immorality are dangerous to the peace and safety of the state. Am I clear? Let's go back and review where we're at now. We have religious liberty. Nobody's going to tell you how to go to church or not go to church. You don't have to be a member of a certain church or profess a certain creed to be in office. You can worship however you want, in whatever manner you want, and have whatever religious sentiments you want. And those are sacred. But because they're sacred, those rights are secured. And that will not hold up in a court of law if you try to justify acts of licentiousness, injurious to morals, or dangerous to the peace and safety of the state. Now, and those moral duties are conformable to the will of God. Or one more clause, to exclude, I'm going to highlight this one, to exclude the Holy Bible from use in any public school in this state. So how do we rectify that with religious liberty, different modes and sects of work, sects, not sex, but sects with a C, modes of worship, and free enjoyment of all religious sentiments? How do we justify that in a court of law? If these religious liberties are secured rights. But we also saw here that what is not a secured right is activities that are licentious and injurious to morals. Because morals is our social duty. And it says that our social duty is to conform to the will of our Maker. Even if you're a Buddhist or a Muslim or a Jew. But you also can't justify the exclusion of the Holy Bible from use in any public school of this state. Remember what we looked at last time. All legislators and public officials swear an oath to uphold and defend both the federal and the state constitutions. They cannot contradict each other, because if you're sworn under oath and one contradicts the other one, then one would be truth and one would be a lie. So they all must work together. So how did this clause get in a constitution? How did this clause show up in a Bill of Rights? And so next session, in session 4, we are going to look at precedent. What went first? How did this clause develop from 1817 through 3 previous constitutions and fulfill all of these duties? So hopefully I got your attention, because if we want to make America great again, we have got to swear an oath to uphold and defend our constitutions to the letter. So I just showed you something right here that is a bombshell, if there ever was a bombshell. And we're going to see where it comes from. Is it constitutional, and will it hold up in a court of law? Something to think on tonight, folks.